Thank you all for coming out. We've got a small crowd, but this is one of my most favorite meetings that we do. We didn't do it last year. We're reinstituting it this year because it is really a great way for everybody to learn what's going on, get out in Gold Dome, and some of the decisions that are being made that might affect education for many years to come. So I'm very excited to be doing this meeting. I'm actually going to turn it over really quickly to Cynthia. She's got a few words to say before she needs to leave. So.
Hi. I think most of you know me. I'm Cynthia Briscoe-Brown. I'm your at-large school board representative. And with Matt Westmoreland and Leslie Grant, who represents District 1, and as you know, they're all sort of meshed in together in the Grady cluster. We do everything we can to keep your schools great, which they are. Y'all are really kind of easy, for which we're grateful, because if you've been following the news, you know that we've been making some hard decisions in the last few weeks, trying to make sure that every single one of our kids gets the kind of support and the kind of tools for success that y'all have here in the Grady cluster. Want to thank you for everything that you do. I know this meeting really gets the kind of hardcore folks. So thank you for coming, and thank you for continuing to be supportive of our schools here in the Grady cluster. I've loved seeing some of you at recent events. I've been at the fundraiser at Springdale Park and the Inman Foundation event, and I'm looking forward to seeing others of you at other places soon. And I am not turning this into a campaign event because I know better than to do that. But as of this morning, I am able to say that I am running for re-election. And I hope that so many of you were so supportive, gave your time, your energy, your yards for signs, your homes for events, and most important, your votes, so that I've been able to work with the 8 greatest colleagues in the world and the best superintendent in the country to move this district forward in a way that I really think has never happened. We're proud of what we've done. We're proud of what we're going to do. And the reason I want to continue is because now we need to make it bigger than this group of 10 people. We need to make it sustainable. We need to make it long-lasting. And we need to keep moving it forward. So if you're interested in helping out, please contact me. If you have any questions about that or anything else, I'm willing to take them now. And let's see, anybody got a question? Yes?
How do I get on your email list?
If you will email me at cynthia.briscoe.brown@gmail.com. That's my campaign email address. Because I don't use the APS address for that.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. If you have any, I'm going to leave a few cards out on the table here, and if you ever need to contact me for any reason, it's got my cell phone number and my APS email address, and if there is anything I can do for you, I hope you'll let me know. I'm going to sit and listen for a few minutes, and then I have to be somewhere else at 7:30. So I'll leave those right there. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, a few housekeeping type things before we get started. First, I want to say thank you to all the individuals and organizations that have donated to CINS this year that made our teacher grants program super successful. They're on the back of the program. So if you know any of these people, if you live in any of these neighborhoods, thank you very much. If you are any of these individuals, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We will be showcasing our teacher grants as well as we're going to be doing our teacher grant showcase a little bit differently this year. And so watch our Facebook page and our website for more information about that. If you are not a member, we have membership forms. Do we have membership forms? If we don't have membership forms,
You can go online and do it.
you can go online and do it.
I
Or
have
you can
some.
let us know, and we will.
I have some in my bag.
Real quick.
Yes. But we do rely on members to help us with our support here as well. So thank you to all of our members, and you are welcome to join. As you go through, there's some cards in the center of the tables where you can make some notes, jot any questions that you might have. We're going to try to hold the questions to the end and then have all 3 of our panelists answer them kind of together. So those cards are there for you to remember what's going on as you ideas and a little bit different, can answer different questions about what's going on with education policy and budget. We have State Representative David Dreyer here, who represents District 59, and serves on the House Higher Education Committee. Elena Parent, our state senator, represents District 42, and serves on the Senate Education and Youth Committee. And then we have Claire Suggs. She is a senior education policy analyst with the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. GBPI, I always switch the letters around when I'm saying that, is an independent, nonpartisan nonprofit that provides research and education on Georgia's fiscal and economic outlook. They examine budget and tax policies and provide education to inspire informed debate and responsible decision-making. And I will say you can sign up for their emails, and they are incredibly informative and really wonderful. The blog posts are great, so I would encourage everybody to do that. It gives really good information about what's coming out of the state legislature. So thank you guys for being here very much, and we're going to start with Claire, and then we'll move on from there. And again, if we'll hold our questions to the end, that'd be great.
Well, it fits an organization that's budget in the title. That's what I'm going to focus on tonight, and I did bring copies of our most recent analysis of the budget that's been proposed for the upcoming fiscal year. Just to have as a resource for you. We have other information on our website. Thank you for that. Well, I am lucky I get to work with really amazing colleagues. And just to expand, we work in education, but also the state budget and tax policy, healthcare, economic development, and economic security. So if there are ever any issues like around Medicaid or Medicaid expansion and how Medicaid affects schools, for example, I am fortunate. My colleagues are a great resource. So I would encourage you, if you have questions on any of those issues, to check out our website. Yes. We try to be a resource to legislators, but really also community members, because you all have a really, really important part of the legislative process. So that's a lot of what we want to do, is to get information into the hands of people who can use it. So that's a little bit about GBPI. Yes, took a stumble over it too when I started here. School funding for the first time in a while has not been a huge issue in this legislative session. And I think in large part that's because funding has gone up. I know when I was here 2 years ago, we were still facing a pretty sizable austerity cut. And that has changed. If you just kind of read the headlines, it looks like things are going pretty well. And I saw, I think it was in the AJC last year, after the legislative session wrapped last year, and the headline was an increase of $1.5 billion for K-12 schools. And the headline, if there's one this year, is going to be a $2 billion increase in the Spanish, I should clarify, since 2014. So funding has gone up. And I think a lot of people kind of look at that and think, okay, this is good. So our schools are in good shape, right? Well, if you kind of peel back the headline and really kind of look at where the funding has gone, it becomes clear that, yeah, things are definitely better than they had been for a while. But that our districts still continue to face some really pretty significant financial challenges. And so that's what I want to do, is to kind of look through where that $2 billion, once they finalize the 2018 budget, will be $2 billion. So where has that gone? And what does it really mean for districts and schools? So of the $2 billion, the biggest single portion, close to $900 million, has gone to reduce the cuts that were made. If you have followed the budget closely, you know that we have not funded, General Assembly, the governor, has not funded our K-12 funding formula in full since 2003. So each year, we have been sending, or the state has been sending, less to districts than it is supposed to. The size of those cuts have varied over the years, but from 2010 to 2014, in each of those years, the cut was $1 billion or more. So, and those of you who had kids in school during those years, or were working in schools in those years, you know how challenging those years were. Districts were not, or kids were not in school for 180 days. districts lost over 9,000 teachers. School, enrollment was going up, but our teachers were going down, which meant class sizes were smaller. So things were really, really challenging during these years. So that $900 million has gone to begin to fill in that $1 billion hole that was in districts' budgets. So that's the biggest chunk of that increase, is trying to cut, fill that in. And I want to be clear, it's kind of a statement of the obvious, but I think a lot when I talk to people, they don't realize those really aren't new dollars. That's restoring the cuts and trying to get districts, able to provide the core services that they need to provide. The second biggest piece of that funding has gone to student enrollment growth and salary adjustments for teachers. We've added over 30,000 new kids to our schools since 2014. We have to pay for those students. So that's, if we don't increase funding to keep up with that, we're going to have to start cutting services again. So that's over about 2/3 of that $2 billion increase is just for those two things, getting back to core services and covering enrollment growth. The next biggest chunk, about 16%, is going to keep up with rising retirement costs. That's really important. That's part of attracting and retaining a good teacher workforce. That's an investment we need to make. But those are dollars that we can't put directly into the classroom. That we can't use to bring class sizes back down or to provide some additional supports to teachers and to students. And then the final piece, that $2 billion, and this is just about 8% of it, will be in the 2018 budget, and that's for a salary increase for teachers. And I want to be really clear, this is the first time since 2009 that we have increased the state teacher salary schedule. I know there's been a lot of conversation over the last 2 years about this increase for teachers. The state didn't actually fund that increase last year. So this is the first time since 2009, in 9 years, that we're increasing teacher salaries, which were clearly overdue. But so yes, kind of stepping back to that big picture, you see that number, and we think, so we've solved the problem. Everything is great. But what that money does is, again, just really getting our schools and districts back to that level of core services and enabling them to sustain them. These are not dollars that we can really use to provide a lot of extra fancy stuff. This is providing the basics. And I want to also note that while, yes, we are restoring those cuts, which is a very good thing, and that has brought a lot of relief to districts, at the same time, the state has made changes that have actually increased the costs that districts face. So on the one hand, funding is going up, but at the same time, costs are going up. So that really kind of mitigates the impact of the funding increases. And then the most notable place where this has happened is health insurance for bus drivers, for custodial workers, and other non-teaching staff. That has for years been a cost that's been shared by the state and districts. And the state began in the 8 years ago, started slowly to decrease its portion of funding and finally eliminated it in 2011. So that entire cost now has been shifted to districts. And since 2012, district spending on health insurance for these key workers, I mean, you cannot operate schools without these employees. District spending has increased $400 million. So that is a significant cost that districts are now grappling with, and it will go up about $30 million in the upcoming budget. So again, those are, they have to cover those costs. Those folks need to be here. They're an important part of the school. But it adds one more real challenge for districts as they're trying to balance their budget and restore the services that have been cut. The other place where we see a lot of cost shifting from the state to districts is student transportation. Funding for student transportation has been falling pretty steadily over the last 20 years. In the mid-1990s, the state covered about half of student transportation costs. Right now, they're covering about 15%. And this again, this is not an optional service for districts. Children will not learn if they are not in school, so districts have to get kids to school safely. And this is an issue that affects every district. It has had a particularly harmful impact on rural communities where they have fewer number of kids that are spread out over a larger area. And those are districts that are spending, some of them, over $1,000 to transport individual kids each year. I mean, $1,000 per student. So this really is kind of a big and yet hidden cost for districts that is putting a lot of strain on them. And the more funds, the more of their, their local revenue that they have to devote to health insurance for non-teaching staff or health or to transportation, again, those are dollars that they can't direct to the classroom. So there has been an improvement on the one hand, and we do see that valuable partial restoration of austerity, but we also see costs going up, and so there really are still, for many districts in schools, some real significant challenges going forward. And I think I want to shift, and I don't know if I'm kind of perhaps moving us more to the policy conversation. One of the things that I just kind of wanted to highlight when we think about funding, and when we think about the conversation that is certainly underway at the Capitol and has been ongoing for several years now about how we support struggling schools. And when we're talking about struggling schools, we're really talking about schools with high concentrations of poor kids. I mean, that's the challenge. How do we effectively serve these students and make sure that they really succeed to the degree that they and we want them to? We have not in that conversation really talked about funding. And that conversation does not begin and end with funding. There are a lot of issues that are in play here, and there's not an easy solution. But we really, funding has to be a part of that conversation. We know that dollars matter for these kids. We know that they do better when there is adequate investment in them and in the services that we can provide them. And that's one piece of the puzzle that we really haven't talked about yet, is really looking at what resources do these students need to be successful, and what is the state's role in ensuring that they do in fact have those resources. And that's kind of where I'll leave it. A bit of a shift, but I will turn that over now to our legislators. Hear from them on their thoughts and perspectives. I get to sit and watch them. So this will be a treat.
You want to go first, Lenny, or me go?
Well, why don't we sort of jointly talk about
Great.
338, which
Yes,
is the one that Claire just mentioned. So that's House Bill 338. As you all know, we had the Opportunity School District on the ballot last year, which in a very broad and bipartisan fashion, the voters rejected. So now there is, the governor though has remained interested in, or at least talking about being interested in trying to find a way to support schools that are struggling. And one interesting thing is that the governor had set up this Education Reform Commission a year and a half ago, and it issued a big report with all kinds of recommendations, including an update formula for QBE. And numerous, which is the quality basic education allotment, basically. So when Claire said we haven't funded it since 2003, that's the formula by which we currently calculate how much the state is supposed to spend on and send to each of the districts for each pupil. So numerous governors have tried to update or change QBE. There have been numerous study commissions. No one has ever ended up pushing it through. There are some differences of opinion about whether or not it kind of really needs updated. Claire would probably be a little bit more of an expert here. It probably does in some ways, but it's a difficult task. Well, anyway, the governor spends, a lot of energy producing this work product that had a new funding formula in there. It was recommending a number of things related to charter schools, teacher retention, early childhood education. Another big component was well, in the funding, they were gonna add in a factor for poverty. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. There was another big thing that was going to actually do some merit pay for teachers for the first time. I knew there was something controversial in there. Well, that ends up kind of being DOA. And there was a big outcry about the merit pay for teachers. That was pretty immediate. And the Speaker of the House, in the beginning of 2016, made it fairly clear that he had a lot of concerns about that. So at that time, the governor said, I'm just gonna delay implementing the changes from the Education Reform Commission for a year when it won't be an election year. Well, fast forward, what's happened is he basically abandoned almost the entire thing. And his mantra this year was, if we don't do something about the struggling schools, there's no point in even doing anything about any of the rest of it. I don't know that I agree with that. I'm not sure exactly where his head is on all these things. I do believe that he, probably because he had put so much time and energy into the Opportunity School District, and because it went so flat, he probably is very preoccupied, and that's not wrong, with these 150 schools that really have had more struggling performance. Well, as you all know, OSD was kind of a change management plan, for lack of a better word. It wasn't really, it didn't talk about poverty, it didn't talk about the needs of those students, it didn't in any way address the additional funding that would need to come along if you were going to try to assist these schools, which have, I think about 92% of them have at least 96% kids in poverty or more. So I know that the governor in his mind thought that he was going to direct more money to them, but that was never a part of the conversation on purpose. And so I think it rang very dishonest with a lot of the voters. So now we have a very different plan, and it is currently still going through changes. We heard it for the third time today in the Senate Education Committee. We had one substitute with us in the committee, another one is still coming. So I can't tell you what exactly it does yet, but I can tell you that it has a lot of language in there about needing to tackle poverty, look at what the factors are for these students and their families that are impediments to academic success, and setting up basically like a grant program that would provide these schools with additional resources. This would be done via hiring a chief turnaround officer that would sort of be hired with input from a variety of actors, including the Department of Education and the State Board of Education, but then would report to the State Board of Education. There's been disagreement about that because the superintendent really believes that the chief turnaround officer should be resident in Department of Education. The governor would like to have control. So the State Board of Education is appointed by the governor. I don't really anticipate that that will change. I think that's probably a battle that the school superintendent probably will not be able to win. So the way it would be set up is this chief turnaround officer would then hire turnaround coaches, and it's like vague as to how many there might be, but they might have one or more schools, but they would need to be sort of resident in the part of the state as the schools that they are serving. So it wouldn't be that they were all like up here in Atlanta, which is good. I think that's very important. There's a whole lot of language in here that sounds like something that my Democratic caucus has been really trying to push with this, which is this notion of community schools. But there's still a lot of skepticism. Well, why is that? First of all, there's not what some people do not think there is a delineated metric by which schools would be considered to be brought into the turnaround district. There's also a discussion of additional money and grants, but there is no money provided for. So that's generated a whole lot of skepticism because we know what Plan A was, right? It was we just take over the schools. Now, so the way this would work is probably a lot of you know that all of our districts except for 2 are already under contract with DOE through state law, whereby they basically have opted to waive some, the state waives some of its requirements and gives the district additional flexibility, but in return the district is supposed to be performing. And basically what's in this bill, 338, is basically what districts have sort of already agreed to. So that's kind of interesting, as it is. And what it is it's basically like within a certain number of years, if you're kind of not up to these standards, the chief turnaround officer under this bill or the state board under current law can start coming in and basically assessing, recommending, blah, 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 getting all the way down to letting the kids go to a different school in that district or putting it in the hands of a charter operator. If I'm getting any of the details wrong, hop in.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, yeah, I mean, I know I'm fairly close, but I might be saying a couple of things, especially because I haven't seen versions X, Y, and Z yet, so, you know. Yeah, so anyway, you know, and like part of me has been like, and this is just the political stuff that's going on within the various caucuses. I mean, something will pass. This is not a constitutional amendment. It does not need a 2/3 majority. I really welcome the attention in many ways on the schools. One of the reasons I opposed OSD was this like fairy dust thing. Let's talk about what is actually needed to improve performance of these schools. It's not the governor and the state take charge. We need, you know, to assess what's going on with these kids. We need additional funding. I got to go to New Orleans with the governor and look at their recovery school district 2 years ago. And they told us, they said, you cannot do any of this on per pupil average funding alone. And then we just got back to Georgia, ignored 100% of that, and, you know, just passed this ridiculous thing. So I oppose that. But I like a lot of what's in here. But there's a lot of pushback from a lot of folks that are just saying, yeah, I don't see any money. Yes, they've got all this flowery language, but they're doing this, but really we know the goal is for them to take over the schools. And meanwhile, they're rushing through or trying to push through this, you know, a big increase in the backdoor vouchers that we have. So, you know, I think there's some valid skepticism. Why is there no money attached to this, and why are we trying to increase the backdoor vouchers by $40 million, right? The big word is the governor has promised there's going to be money. Now, there is a bill that provides a sort of funding mechanism. So y'all know about the student scholarship organizations. That's the backdoor vouchers I'm referring to. Basically, it's a one-to-one tax write-off. If you give money to one of these student scholarship organizations, your state taxes will be deducted by that much, and the money goes directly to private schools. So that's actually currently in court. It's been going on for a long time now, and it's very opaque by design. It's been very opaque by design, and every private school around touts that thing. I mean, I know, I've seen it, because it's more money for them. So it is like a total racket as far as I'm concerned. There are a couple of SSOs that do service low-income children. Most of them, it's people who already might send their children to private schools and this way get a backdoor voucher, just straight up deduction from what otherwise would be coming to the state to fund our public schools. So, the bill that Chairman Coleman, he's the chairman of the House Education Committee, has advanced would set up a new tax credit program with the money to go to struggling schools. So you could, as a taxpayer, decide to give money, you would get the write-off, and the money would go to these struggling schools. That, if it passes, would theoretically raise about $135 million over 9 or 10 years? 15 years.
Yeah, just to,
jump in.
the first 7 years, it's a 15-year tax credit, and the first 7 years, the cap is $7 million, and the remaining 8 years, the cap is $10 million. But your point, if you just compare that to the escalation of the SSO program, which is now at 58, in which they want to take to $100 million, and as Elena just said, you know, the very little evidence that we have on who gets that shows that this is, you know, going to children in families whose incomes above the state average. Only 18% of students who are getting the voucher qualify or fall into the lowest quartile of family income in the state. So just that kind of juxtaposition, you know, we're scratching for funds for schools that serve low-income kids, and yet at the same time are considered
Yeah, and let's not forget, I mean, we're foregoing revenue and taxes that if we took, we could guarantee it went to struggling schools.
Right, so why, you know, I actually do think that the governor does want to direct some money to the struggling schools, but because it's so opaque, it does give me some pause. Now in the bill, they also have set up this sort of education advisory council that would be made up of a lot of vested interest groups, including, you know, the Professional Association of Georgia Educators, and I think the School Board Association might have gotten added in, and who else is in there?
The Superintendent's Association.
The Superintendent's Association. So those groups, and not to mention politicos that are considering this legislation and are being told there will be money behind this, I know would go absolutely bonkers and would have a huge platform if it did end up that all they were trying to do with this chief turnaround officer was just blow through the time when they could just then take the school over and hand it over to a charter. Now, the contracts that schools are under says that they could even be a for-profit charter. This legislation would limit it to a nonprofit. So in some ways that would be, I think, better. But, so, you know, a lot of these groups would go crazy, so I have to assume that they must have some plan, but it's just a mystery why it wouldn't be more apparent unless they're worried that the Republicans will all throw their hands up and vote no. I'm not sure. Which is why I think they, in OSD, did not write some of that stuff down because they couldn't afford to lose Republican votes. And a lot of our colleagues believe there's already just too much money spent. So, and are really not interested in there being additional dollars. So the governor kind of cooked that up to pass it on Republican votes basically only. But then it went down to the ballot box because the people in the public could see that that was not an adequate, any kind of real solution. So you know, where I am right now is, I, of course, need to see the final product. Something will pass. I don't want to vote no, but I have serious questions, but there is a lot of really good language in the bill. A lot of it could already be done, so in some ways it's like fluff, but you could make an argument pro-fluff or anti-fluff. Like, okay, it's fluff, which means they already have it, which means we sort of won. Oh, and all this language about all these things they're going to do, like that's stuff we've been advocating for. I can't believe they're saying that. I mean, it's the first time the majority party has had any language like that in the bill.
I mean, we just kind of, there's a lot of ambiguity in the bill. Believe it or not, I don't know if you saw the House bill. The most current version, which was introduced in the Senate, is much better.
No, that one I never read. I never read the House bill.
So it is, I mean, it is absolutely a work in progress. There is a lot of ambiguity in it and some real questions about how this chief turnaround officer and the people who would fall under him or her, how they would actually work with the Department of Education, which already has its own school improvement team. And it's really unclear, are we creating something that is kind of comprehensive and that could almost, I don't know, a SWAT force of people coming in to provide really comprehensive services? Maybe that's what this would result in, or are we running the risk of having basically dual agencies with dual teams and kind of splintering the scarce resources that we already have? So,
well, we do that already. I mean,
yeah.
now coming onto the Education Committee, I see very clearly that for decades now, we've basically had warring education power centers between the governor's office and the DOE. Very counterproductive, very inefficient. No one thereby can sort of be laser focused on what is our plan, what is our strategy, this is how we're going to address raising the education bar for Georgia's kids and schools. No, it's all like divided all over the place. But unless we, you know, there are ways that could change, but they're certainly not easy. And right now, it's a big freaking mess.
And we just kind of, the one thing that's in the bill that's gotten attention, I mean, and this is kind of what you referenced, the possibility of you know, schools being taken over by a charter or being subject to other types of intervention by the state. That's actually already in state law. The state has been able to do that for a decade. The State Board of Ed has opted not to pursue those interventions aggressively, but it's clear that at this point, you know, that regardless of what happens with this particular bill, that they are going to move forward much more aggressively in intervening in schools. So I think, you know.
But those folks are part-timers. You know, the State Board of Ed are not, that's not a full-time job.
Well, they wouldn't be the ones doing it. I mean,
That's true, they would have to do similar to what's set
Yeah,
up
I mean,
in this bill.
the state board themselves are simply, if they choose to move forward with an intervention, they're simply, clicking the button, or saying, this is what you now go out and do. And there's a long, it's like 10 or 11 different interventions that can be imposed on schools. And and some are productive, others raise more questions. But right now, the state can already turn over a low-performing school to a charter organization.
For-profit.
First thing I want to say is, when I need information on the budget, education, I go to GBPI. You're a 501c3, aren't you? They're 501c3. That means you can give them money and it is tax deductible.
I like paying my mortgage.
I'm not kidding. We have ammunition on our side that the other side doesn't have, and it's noticeable. It helps us. And then the other thing is, Senator Parent's been serving for a long time. She's great. She's a superstar down there. So since I'm going after them, I'm just going to speak in flowery platitudes instead.
I'm out of here, he's got it from here.
That's right. Let me kind of back up on the big picture stuff for a second. So I got two boys myself. They're 6 and 8. And a couple years ago, my oldest son was saying a prayer at night, and he kind of said something like, thank God for my family, and thank God for my school and my teachers, and it makes me feel like I'm the most special boy in the world. That means something as a parent, right? And that was a good feeling, but at the same time, every single kid in our state is that special, right? Every single kid in the world is that special. And every single kid deserves the same opportunity. So where I'm at in Grant Park, we have great school options. Parkside, neighborhood charter school, D.H. Stanton, and then those go up to King Middle, and that goes up to Maynard Jackson High School. We recognize the principal of Maynard Jackson High School. She's increased graduation rates 22% there in about 4 or 5 years. Amazing.
Wasn't she national principal of the year?
Yeah.
She was finalist for it.
Finalist.
Yep. And she was Georgia principal of the year.
Okay.
So you've got a great situation for some people. And then if you go 2 miles south of where I'm at, Thomasville Heights Elementary School, I don't know if anybody's been to the drive-in movie theater down on Moreland. Right across from that is the lowest performing elementary school in the state of Georgia. And it is no coincidence at all that that is the poorest census tract in the country. Okay? So what happened in that neighborhood, it was an older working class neighborhood. You see a lot of retirees live there now. And you have a 750-unit Section 8 housing complex right there that feeds every single kid that goes into that elementary school. And the problems all stem from poverty, one way or another. Attendance is a huge problem. People that are low income have to move a lot. That's what goes along with it. So you get kids that transfer school a lot. Health issues. They did something at that Section 8 housing complex. They studied how many asthma visits to Grady for kids were related to that, and it was enormous. Something like 10 to 15% of all asthma-related visits for kids to Grady were from that Section 8 housing complex because the mold was so bad. Parents, it's easy for someone at the state capitol to blame parents for not being more involved, but when people are working 2 and 3 jobs and have other issues going on because we've cut welfare, then yeah, they're not going to be able to be involved in their kids' lives. So it's in some ways it's heartbreaking to spend time there, but it's encouraging. Our school board has had a lot of courage to address that situation head on. Purpose-Built Communities has a private foundation that can put a lot of money and resources, has taken that over. And it's a very interesting model. Just as a little side, I don't want to get into a charter, non-charter debate, because what they have done on that, and as far as we can tell, we're one of the first places in the country that this has been done. This is a private operator that cannot kick kids out. One of the criticisms is charter schools get rid of unwanted kids so their test scores go up. They can't do that. The other one is there's a lottery-based admission program for some charter schools. So only the most motivated parents that are already involved in their kids' lives can go through the rigorous application process. Thomasville Heights Elementary School has to take every single child in that footprint. And then in the other public schools south of me, in the southern part of my district, which really need help. APS has tried a lot of innovative programs. Putting washer and dryers in the school, putting medical clinics in the school, 3 meals a day, all these sorts of things. We're lucky because in most other school districts, the school boards kind of said, you know, we're going to do what we can, but stuff that happens outside the classroom is not really our responsibility. So, you know, we'll see what happens. Our school board has said, we got to educate the kids. And if that requires them to be fed, clothed, and have medical care, we're going to do that. At this Thomasville Heights Elementary School, they've set up an Atlanta Volunteers Lawyer Foundation clinic in the school to help address the housing issue. So number one, the parents don't have to move as much. And number two, they can get the mold remediation done. It's mold, rats, cockroaches, making the landlords do what they're supposed to do so that these kids get an opportunity. So we do see, when you talk about school funding formula, it takes more money to educate more children because they have a lot going on outside the classroom. You need, they're doing a great job, APS, with the socio-emotional learning. So you actually have to have a lot of counselors. You have to have a lot of people in the classroom to teach kids who have never been taught this because their parents were never taught it and their parents were never taught it. This is multi-generational cycles, right? That when something doesn't go your way, violence and yelling is not the way to address it. Now, if that's all you've ever known, that's what you're going to do. So we have programs in place that are teaching these kids other ways to solve problems, and they're giving kids a really big opportunity. So these are the kind of things that we should be addressing as a state. We should be looking at the school funding formula. We should be trying to see what we can do to work. And then the other thing that we've seen work in APS and Myers is giving school leaders more autonomy so that they can make hard decisions on who are the best people to be in their classrooms. And you have to have accountability, but accountability based on the situation. I've even heard a few Republicans say this. You know, if you're one guy, I forget his name, but he's a kind of a general contractor who lays pipe. He said, look, if you're laying pipe in the dirt, you know, you can go 25 miles a day. But if you're in the middle of granite, you can go half a mile a day. How do you calibrate the scale for what the teachers are working with? So these are the kind of things that I want to see us addressing. One interesting thing about 338, and it stays in there or it doesn't stay in there, is, and the OSD didn't do this, there was going to be a more thorough evaluation of the school and what problems are holding kids back in that school. That was persuasive for a couple of people in my caucus, the Democratic caucus on the House side. Now, I didn't see any money. I think we should be addressing the money. I think we should be addressing ways to fund these schools adequately before we label them failing, and I think that's a tough thing to do. There's a few other bills. Maybe I can just run through. Let's just run through a couple other things. Senate Bill 152, which is Senate sent to us, would make it harder for schools to expel children. It would require schools to find alternative education arrangements for children. I mean, there's exceptions for violent crimes and severe bullying, as there probably should be, but I think that's a step in the right direction. Senate Bill 29 requires testing for lead in both public and private water schools and solutions, and publishing the reports. So that's a good thing.
Which, by the way, APS did proactively a year ago.
Right, DeKalb did too. Yeah.
It's great stuff. Kind of an absolutely insane one in my mind, and I don't want to say that too much, is SR 192, which would put a constitutional amendment up so that instead of people electing their school board members, grand juries would appoint the school board members, and the people would elect the superintendents. So you're trying.
Well, it would be a local referendum.
Whether they're going to do that or not?
Oh yeah, it wouldn't be like statewide. So first we would have to have a constitutional amendment permitting it, which I doubt is going to happen, but let's just say. Then you would, the local delegation, say from, apparently there are some rural counties that back in the day voted against, they liked the way they had it, because it was a constitutional amendment 25 years ago to force everyone to do appointed super and elected school board. And so the senator from up in Toccoa, he's like, my county voted no, and I guess there are just a lot of people up there that thought the old way was better for them. So it would have to be then that the local delegation brings that, and we pass a bill allowing that county to have a vote whether or not they want to do that.
That's a great book.
I mean, so it definitely would not be like just, yeah.
But if anybody's ever done a search for a superintendent, I mean, you're trying to attract great people from all over the country. They're not, a great superintendent's gonna be employed. They're not gonna quit their job to get their name on the ballot for a chance to win something. So it's kind of a
It would be a really bad idea for any large system. That was one of the reasons, yeah.
Super cool one that the Democrats introduced is House Bill 273. It's currently in the Senate. It would require recess, 30 minutes of recess a day, and wouldn't allow kids to be punished through the removal of recess. And yeah, it would, and, I mean, I've got 2 boys. Man, you try to put them in the chair all day long. You know what would happen?
Bad idea.
You'd have to end up medicating. And I mean, I think that's what happens, unfortunately, right? Boys, I mean, kids are gonna be kids. Boys and girls need that unstructured time. So I really hope we get that through. And then real briefly, we talked about this on the Higher Education Committee. You know, there's an interest in this. It's gonna affect a couple of universities close to us, Agnes Scott and Emory, but also folks are gonna, you know, graduate from high school and have to go. Campus carry, allowing people to be armed on campus, passed out of the House. It's in the Senate. It's passed the Senate before. Our best hope is that the governor will veto it, though I know Elena's going to make a wonderful speech from the floor and switch from Republicans, but how many we can switch is one thing. So University of Georgia was founded in 1776. Now is the first time we believe they need to they need to have guns on campus. It doesn't make any sense at all. Every campus police department has said this is going to make us less safe, and it's going to cost us more money. Many campuses $1 million a year to secure their facilities. There's been a very punitive bill that was part of this anti-immigration stuff, House Bill 37, which would cut off all funding for schools, private colleges and universities that declare themselves sanctuary campuses. Okay, and not only do the schools get their funding cut off, but there are folks, if you qualify for the Hope Scholarship and you're a Georgia citizen and you go to a private college or university, you're eligible for a Hope equalization grant. It would cut off the money to those students that are there if an administrator makes a decision to somehow shield an illegal immigrant. But the interesting thing about that bill is the bill sponsors, they said it from the floor, which was unbelievable, is no college or university is currently doing this or threatening to do this. So instead what we're doing is we're putting up a big not welcome sign to some of the best and brightest students from around the world. If anybody can get into Emory, Berry, Agnes Scott, Oglethorpe, I want them in our state. That would be great for workforce development, but we send a message completely unnecessary that they're not welcome. And then the worst thing, the campus rape bill.
By the same guy, as the same campus guy.
Earl Earhart. He says that people accused of sexual assaults on college campus don't get enough due process, okay? Look, we all want to get the due process thing right, every single one of us, and we will work on this. But the stat is, out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, 6 end up in incarceration. Yeah, it's a broken system, but for the victims, not for the accused. So this person called these people snowflakes, told sexual assault survivors they're going to get triggered, they need to do so outside of his committee hearing room because it's a macro-aggressive environment. And I don't know, it's attempting to end up on Fox News or something for being the least politically incorrect person or the most politically incorrect person in the world. So that would also, by the way, put us in violation of federal standards on investigating sexual assaults and protecting women and students on our college campuses. So the Senate is doing everything they can to stop that, especially our good Democratic senators.
We are trying. It is passed out of higher ed.
Passed out of higher ed. So we'll fight on those. Please pay attention to those. I mean, the last thing we need to be doing is making it harder on sexual assault victims on college campuses. So that's kind of a quick rundown.
Well, the problem is that the gentleman who is pushing the sanctuary bill, but more upsetting, the campus rape bill, is the chairman of higher ed appropriations.
He funds schools.
So everyone is terrified. All the universities get really scared. So they just run around and kind of cower. And so right now on the sexual assault bill, the private colleges have had a little bit more wiggle room to speak up. For them, it's still risky and dangerous, but they're not in the exact same position that our public universities are. So they're taking a little bit more of a public role in saying like, look, this is not good, you know, it would put us out of, you know, I mean, it's, the premise upon which it's founded is not correct. Meanwhile, we have all these policies and procedures. Your bill would cause us to violate federal law in favor of state law, which obviously we're not going to do. So that puts us in a tenable position, and you know, just on and on. So, you know, I mean, I think he was making the comment that 40% of sexual assault complaints he thought were bogus. 40% he thinks are bogus. So, and he's become a real champion for this very small but vocal group of people who are, you know, a lot of mothers of boys young men who feel like they've been unfairly accused or had their college careers ruined by a accusation of sexual assault. So, I mean, of course we need due process on, I mean, yeah, we don't want anyone falsely accused and, you know, with their life ruined. And there have been these federal guidance letters coming out that have sort of, like in 2011 there was one, and then that sort of caused the colleges to all set up more robust Title IX procedures. Then apparently I don't know if it was the Department of Education or the Office of Civil Rights Within or whatever, was like, okay, well, they went a little bonkers. It may have gone a little, the pendulum may have swung a little too far. So they did another one in 2014 where they said, let's all kind of take a deep breath here. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech had an incident. And this really got in the craw of Representative Earhart. So much so that he like dragged them in, was threatening to withhold all their funding. And I think that it's acknowledged that their appeals process was not what it should have been. Because, you know, being human, whenever, as we all know, whenever humans are involved, mistakes will be made. You know, I don't know that that's a reason to rush through a silly bill that, you know, undoes, or, you know, just has all these ridiculous and untenable contradictions in it. But, yeah. But, something else amusing about this.
Sorry to distract you.
Yeah, you distracted me. Now I can't remember the really,
Am I going to get my bills through the Senate
really
now?
important thing
Right.
that I was going to say about that silly bill. But so he yanked Georgia Tech down there and really put them through the ringer, and has sort of made this sort of famous name for himself, and you know, with these sort of very interesting measures that have now also elevated what we are doing at our state capitol yet again to national news, but not in a complimentary way. So that one, it kind of remains to be seen whether or not it actually gets passed.
I think we should do some questions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do.
was gonna say, you guys ready for some questions? All right. So feel free to just open it up and you guys can ask the questions that you want, and if necessary, I'll kind of move things along, but it'll be pretty informal. So, Cynthia, there's a hand right behind you and then you.
Okay, and maybe you can help address this question too, Cynthia. The question that I had was about, you spoke very highly of the work that APS is doing in Thomasville with their turnaround strategy. What would the implications be of House Bill 338? Like, what does the language say currently, and how would it impact what's going on at the local level? And if there isn't any language yet, what do you think would be ideal in order to like help support and expand that kind of work?
Well, yeah, it basically says that and this is where it's sort of like nebulous, and that's cause for concern, but also in some ways appropriate, because it sort of says that if the district is, the only way they could actually move in on the school within 2 years is if the district is just like totally not doing anything. So if a district's doing stuff where there's like an upward trajectory of scores, that's supposed to be taken into account, and that is in the bill.
Just, I mean, the list of schools that would be eligible initially are based, the Governor's Office of Student Achievement calculates a list of, they call them explicitly failing schools. Right now we have 153 schools on that list. The bulk of the schools, as it's written now, though that it's ambiguous, they're going to start at the school that's number 153, and then 152 and under the legislation, wrap in other schools. And that's, again, it's based on, I think, to get on that list, you have to be 3 years at an F on the CCRPI as calculated by COSA. So they would then, if your school has been identified, the chief turnaround officer would come in and would work with the superintendent and the local RESA and do a big assessment, as you mentioned, and then would work with the school leader to craft a turnaround plan. If the school is showing no evidence of improvement, and that's not simply, again, this isn't spelled out with the clarity that we would like, but if the school is not showing improvement, it was initially 2 years, I think it's now 3 years, that's when the state can go through this list of interventions. The Representative Tanner, who is the author of the bill, has been very explicit that improvement, the kind of benchmark of improvement is not simply looking at student test scores. So if there is, if they can show that, yes, they've been investing in these wraparound services and we've seen changes in instruction, really see, instruction improving, or if they can point to kind of interim measures, at least theoretically, the school would not be eligible for takeover. They would let the school continue moving forward with its turnaround plan. But there is a lot of ambiguity around who exactly gets captured and under what circumstances.
And from an APS point of view, when Maria Karstarfin was appointed our superintendent, my colleagues and I began immediately to work with her to develop a strategy for helping our kids in our lowest performing schools. We had a great 5-year turnaround plan that turned into an 18-month plan when the governor dropped OSD on us a little over a year ago now. And so we turned it into an 18-month plan. And we have always been focused on making sure that we were doing the right thing. Incidentally, and as a fringe benefit, that also helps us beat whatever moving target it is that they're using at the state today to measure our schools. We did, as David said, and I appreciated his shout out to Thomasville, we are partnering with purpose-built communities to help us lift Thomasville very quickly, and I have to say, I've been over there in the last few weeks, and it's like night and day from last year to this year. It's really exciting. It used to be just a sad, awful, depressing little place, and you wouldn't want your worst enemy to go there, much less a precious child. And it's light and it's bright, and the kids are excited about being there and excited about learning, and Purpose Built is doing a great job. That model has worked so well for us that at the last board meeting just last Monday, we authorized 2 more partnerships, one with the Kendesi schools for Gideon's Elementary, and another for KIPP, for a new KIPP school in a potential development on the west side, where Woodson Park Academy is right now. And that one's 3 years down the road and is contingent upon the development happening. So we'll see what happens there. Purpose Built will be taking over Slater Elementary School, Price Middle School, and Carver High School, Carver Comprehensive High School in the next couple of years on the same model, and I'm really excited about that. But our focus has been from the beginning to make sure all our kids get everything they need, and in doing so, to prove that we are making that progress.
I think you also asked, what would you like, what would I like us to do, what would we like us to do? I mean, I think the first thing is that we have got to come up with a school funding formula that pays attention to schools and children that are struggling and adequately fund that before we go down these other steps. I mean, I think that's the first thing. And I would love to see someone run for governor on that platform. I think they would be very successful if they did that.
Well, interestingly, and I believe Claire was at all these meetings, the word I received was that at the Education Reform Commission that was launched by the governor, it was made very clear right from the beginning that the discussion was not to be how much would it actually cost to adequately educate our children to what we want it to be. That was not permitted,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that was made clear at the very first meeting by Commissioner, or Dr. Knapp. He just said, I mean, there were several members, two legislators, as well as a member of the state board who asked, well, wait, aren't we supposed to look at cost? No, that's a very interesting philosophical question, but that is not what we are here to answer. So they set funding at the level set by our current funding formula, which was, of course, created by the General Assembly in 1985. So we've tweaked it since then, but we haven't in any substantive way really looked at it and taken into account, one, we're expecting a heck of a lot more of students and teachers today than we were in 1985. We just are, the standards are much higher. We certainly have not taken into account the fact that 62% of the kids in our public schools are low income. Both of those things, we need to make sure that resources align with student need and expectations. And there's been no substantive conversation. The earlier attempts to redo the QBE have fallen apart because they get to that point and realize, okay, this is going to cost the state more money. And it literally falls apart at that point.
And by the way, that number in APS is 78%. 78% of our kids are on free or reduced lunch, which is by definition living in poverty. So almost 8 out of every 10 kids are in homes that struggle every day just to survive. A little less statewide. I actually have a
Yes.
question. Can I ask?
So-
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, Cynthia had a question.
Sorry. My question is that one of our biggest struggles right now is with our students who are either themselves undocumented or in families where one or more of the adults are undocumented. We have had some just heartbreaking stories over the past few weeks as a result of that last ICE raid. And we have schools, one in your neighborhood, Benteen Elementary, where we're not only not going to merge the school, but we are really going to try to focus on providing support after Garden Hills Elementary, which is the single most diverse school in the city of Atlanta. Benteen has the highest Hispanic population and also the highest undocumented population. And we're really struggling with this. I'm afraid I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there anything that we can expect by way of help or support at the state level to help us keep these precious babies safe?
Absolutely not.
And not have, not have people burst in the middle of the night and take both their parents away, which has happened.
No.
Okay.
I mean, really,
Just thought I'd drop that in.
I cannot imagine that we would pass anything protective now.
I wish we could, and I'd be open to any ideas to try to get it through. The climate's very difficult.
No way.
Okay, just thought I'd try.
Yeah, no, we need to talk about it more.
Yeah.
We need to talk about it more.
First of all, thank you guys for being here. CINS has a very long history with me. You guys tend to be an organization within the Grand Rock area that is very well constructed in ideas and addressing issues. But for House Bill, this is HB 338, purpose-built in terms of, I live in the area, I've been in the area for about 35 years. I work with the parents, I did a lot of canvassing in the area. And the direct concern that I have is the transition process and the impact that it has on the community. So we saw purpose-built come in, teachers lost their jobs at the end of the year. Parents were unsure about the resources that were available. I observed that even though the resources are available, parents aren't aware that the extent that they can utilize the resources, and sometimes they don't use them. And as she mentioned that purpose-built is considering extension to other schools, I guess my question in this bill 338, there is already a lot of systems in place to transform low-performing schools in place. And additional funding and spending, social wraparound services tend to be the deficit of where services need to be. If you combine schools, children can't get back and forth to school in those areas. After-school programs, families can't stay after school for those programs. So I'm wondering if this officer can amend or fix those issues, because the state currently has the power and the district can allocate funds for services to do that without an officer. And that could bridge the gap in children performing in schools, because of the social environment at home. It's kind of like a bottom-up versus top-down, a method that is not dealing with hiring someone versus utilizing the resources, maximizing the resources. My daughter graduated from Manny Jackson High School. My daughter is now she was Miss Manny Jackson, by the way. SGA president, Miss 10th grade, Miss King Middle School. A lot goes on in my house. Yeah, but so I've had a direct understanding of the transition of the school system, and it's changing. And I am very concerned about it. I'm very concerned about the environment of the children and how we're going to integrate those values of the haves and the have-nots and ensure that every child can learn in the exact system without drawing the lines that I see in services and that are being allocated to each child. Because right now, some students don't have books. They don't have books in the classrooms, and the teachers say go online. But if the parents don't have computers or internet services, so that's a barrier alone for the children to learn when they don't have books in the classroom. So there are very small pieces that contribute to a child's learning that I'm not quite sure that has been addressed before we have pursued the option of bringing in other services and additional funding. I know people's feelings about Thomasville High School, but the parents there feel like they're guinea pigs. You know, several organizations have come out to canvass the area, survey them, you know, and it's a very bad feeling that they have, you know, that they go through over and over again, and the stress of that and the psychological part of it has an impact. So sometimes some of those parents want to take their children out of the school just because it's Thomasville, just because they're the poor community. And I just want to know, because I'm on transparency, and I see the functions, I see the services of the officer here, and I'm trying to understand if this bill is passed, what is the direct correlation of services provided by this particular officer and this service that we're going to agree to, going to have on specifically in targeted low-performing schools in comparison to the services and resources that we currently have allocated that would persuade me to veer towards this. I think SB 30, I don't know where that is now.
That's the community schools.
Yeah, for community.
Well, we passed it out of the Senate. It's
Right.
over in the House. I
Because
doubt it'll pass.
That is a very ideal bill because it pretty much involves the entire community in the success
Right.
of the student. But I don't hear a lot about, I haven't heard as much about that bill. And that is what I guess I'm asking. How does this officer, and I was looking at the qualifications, 3 years, teaching on the principal level and things like that. So, and the answer to the Board of Education, I'm just a little skeptical about their ability to not know the environment because they don't live in the environment. They're not a part of the community. The community is a part of a school, but how are they supposed to come into, I don't see that language of how they are supposed to do this, like the step-by-step process, of how we're gonna hold them accountable, saying that they are the reason that this did not work in regards to passing the bill, appointing them, and it doesn't work, and we say it's the bill or the issue is the position's fault and not the school or the area.
So, yeah, first I voted against 338 because I didn't see it translating to significant improvements in the classroom. And you're 100% right about SB 30. That's exactly what we need to be talking about with education policy. I know I was at a lot of those meetings in Thomasville Heights, and you're right. A lot of folks felt like it would also be a vehicle for justification. and then they wouldn't be able to live in the neighborhoods they've lived in for a very long time. And I'm very sensitive to that. But I also had moms with kids at the school saying, after listening to the presentations, if I had the resources when I was a kid at Thomasville Heights, I'd be further along in my life than I am right now. So I think it's tough, and I think that we need to spend time in communities like Thomasville Heights. And I don't think folks from the governor's office and other people that are trying to write this policy have spent much time in our neighborhoods, and they've knocked on doors in Forest Cove, and they spent time in the Forest Cove apartment complex talking to people and finding out what's really going on. So I really do believe that we need the wraparound services. We need the whole community to be involved, and we need to stop displacement. It's hard. It's just hard work without any quick solutions. So that's what I am going to do. That's my commitment. But I would love to hear what other folks think about some aspects of your question.
Well, I think it's all, and as Representative Ryder said, I think it's all very difficult and very emotional. I do believe that what APS did in relation to Thomasville in some ways was a direct result of the OSD coming down, because they wanted to show if OSD had passed, and really most people until the very end really expected that it would, because the ballot language was so unbelievably slanted, so I thought there's no way this thing will get defeated at the ballot box. They were trying to move very aggressively, as the school, Cynthia Briscoe Brown said, from a 5-year plan to an 18-month plan to just show, look, governor, look, state, we are taking bold action. Do not take away our schools. We are not who you want to mess with. We got the message, right? So that's what they're trying to do, but that doesn't mean that it's not really difficult. The community schools model is better. On the other hand, I am surprised and still skeptical, but surprised that we even have a bill that even says the things that this says. Because it does go into poverty, health care, wraparound services, dental care, single parenting. It's interesting to me that, I feel a tremendous sense of victory that we even have like a piece of paper that they're talking about that specifically discusses those things. Because that certainly was not the tune they were singing a mere 2 years ago.
Oh, I had a couple questions, but not half as exciting as those. You mentioned there's 30,000 new students coming in. Is that a normal trend, or is that 30,000 new students that are coming from private, or we have a big old bubble?
It's just normal enrollment growth, over
It's
the
just-
last 4 years.
Our state population is, we've now gone to,
10.5 million?
right, and we're the 9th most or 8th most
I
populous
think
now.
we're the 8th most populous.
We keep going up.
So, and actually the enrollment growth has actually slowed a little bit compared to what was in earlier years. So the recession has led to a little bit of a dip, so they expect that to increase in the coming years, but.
Okay, so it's not abnormal to get 30,000 new ones, okay.
Yeah, and again, that's since 2014, so, again, that's.
Okay, and one of them isn't on the table, I don't think at all, but annexations. Somebody told me that I had to go to you guys to come up with a different policy, because as you know, annexations go through the city,
Right.
and they get to vote on everything and promise all these services, and then the schools get hit
That's
with
right,
it.
yes.
And so is there any way to amend any of that policy where the schools actually get to sit at the table and discuss it, or even vote? Because it
Right.
seems like we're very disjointed
They
between our
are.
city and our
They are,
our
you're right.
schools.
Well, I'm your woman on that one because I represent DeKalb. And so now that Fulton is all incorporated,
Mhm.
any future annexation is gonna be in my district, which is of course all the area right around here, and south of, Atlanta, so just south of East Atlanta Village as well. The city of Atlanta did get the message after the hue and cry about University Avenue and those parents at Morningside sort of going bonkers and saying like, whoa, you can't just annex this area and put the kids in our overcrowded schools. So of course they sent them here. Also, not exactly a uncrowded school. So
Right.
the city did get the message, and they did put in their legislative agenda that they wanted a policy in place that would require basically community discussion, and that the schools sort of be involved on the earlier end, so that it wasn't just like, we annex, oh, you aren't going to the school you thought you were going to, you know, that there would be a more robust discussion. Meanwhile, the DeKalb has sued Atlanta over that annexation, basically making sort of the same argument you just made, which is, we are an independent constitutional authority. How can Atlanta change the boundaries of our independent constitutional body without even a notice requirement for us as the school board? And then DeKalb is very concerned about these things, obviously. So nothing has actually happened yet, partially probably because that lawsuit is out there. I've not assessed its merits at all. But depending on the results of that, we may need to try to look at a different procedure. There has been talk of basically bifurcating the process.
That sounds dirty.
Well, it would basically, yeah, it would basically be like, if you annex, you can annex for municipal services, but you would need to have that whole conversation again if you think you're changing the school boundaries.
Oh, okay.
So you could bifurcate them, just have to repeat it twice. You could make the bar higher for school boundary changes. You could forbid school boundary changes, you know? All these things are still out there.
But that won't happen in this
No,
round, so it's
Nothing
gonna
will
be on the
happen right
table.
now.
Because it's
Yeah.
gonna come up again, because, you
Yes.
know, Emory's
that's right.
touching us now with
That's
that
right.
one property.
Yeah.
And I had one,
I know all about that, yeah.
they went in and it's a money grab is what it is, but anyway, the other one is the Hope. I had heard rumblings that it was gonna be reformed, the Hope Scholarship Program, so that there's a more needs-based, and I don't know if that's going anywhere, or if that is even on the table, or if anybody
But
cares.
I think that's is absolutely what needs to happen, and it needs to be a need base. So the number one indicator of academic success in college is not your high school GPA or your high school SAT or ACT score. It's your unmet financial need. The more unmet financial need you have, harder it is to get through college. It's tough. But we're stuck with the system we have. The need-based Hope supplement was based on lottery proceeds. I'm sorry, casino proceeds. And so that's not, casinos aren't going anywhere. The Democrats.
This year, anyway.
This year, by now,
Yeah.
this year. The Democrats didn't commit to anything on the casinos, but I think the way some of us postured it was, not me, but some leadership in my Democratic House caucus postured it as, the only thing that opens the door on the conversation in the casinos is need-based college scholarships, okay? I have my own concerns about disadvantaged neighborhoods getting stuck with a casino that they don't want, but that's another issue.
Same. I spent several months working on a report on Hope last year. And you know, I'm not privy to the behind the closed doors conversations around financial aid. I would say, no, I don't think anything has happened in this session. I do think, however, one, that they won't change the vote, because it is it is too popular, it has too many stakeholders. But there is a real conversation, and maybe us as a maybe there's something I don't know, but there is an explicit acknowledgement that Hope is not meeting the needs of the students in the state. And that has even been acknowledged, you know, by legislative leaders and the governor. I mean, this is a conversation that is not moving away. There's not a clear and easy path right now. There are a few movements. You know, there's a bill that passed the Senate and the House to increase the portion of lottery revenues that goes to the Hope program plan, just an acknowledgement we have this growing need. So I am hopeful that we will see something. In 2015, the university system, and this is not taking into account the kids, the students who are in the technical college system, but only the university system, you know, estimated their unmet need was $808 million. That need is not going away when you look at our K-12 population. We know 60% kids will not go on to higher ed if we don't get serious about need-based aid. And I think that there is, I think in the business community, I think among elected leaders, you know, they know this is coming. And so it's how do we address it? And the big question is, what's the revenue source?
Well, and there is currently a study being conducted, paid for by the Gates Foundation. Who's doing it? Is it?
It's the Southern Regional Education Board is doing it.
Okay, so the Southern Regional Education Board, and so they're supposed to be reporting back to us on how we can fund, and what is the need for funds for higher ed, needs-based, to get to the figure that Claire mentioned, which is 60% with at least a 2-year degree.
And I just kind of want to piggyback on what we keep talking about college affordability, we keep talking about the tuition increases and what's happened at Hope. The tuition increases have been driven by deep cuts in state funding for both the university system and the technical college system. So if the state was funding these post-secondary systems in the way that they used to fund them, we would not have seen these tuition hikes. You know, we cannot separate the conversation around affordability from the state's commitment to public higher education. I mean, it has to be part of that conversation, and it rarely is. Rarely do they acknowledge the cuts that have been imposed on both systems. So
Yeah, they won't admit it. They'll say they haven't cut anything because they won't take into account inflation or increased enrollment. So they will not like admit that. But I know I saw the figures. It's gone up 8,000 a year, and 5,000 of that is due to cuts in state funding and Hope.
And even with the tuition and fee increases that we have, you know, the per student funding that's available in the university system is still below what it was in 2006. So even though they have been looking to students and their families to make up the gap, they can't. And so you know, we're still not at the level that we were before. And that's, I mean, and that shows on campuses. That has led to a reduction of services. We've seen class sizes go up there too, and other support systems go away.
I have a quick question about the recess bill, for lack of a better word. Is there any provisions or at least conversation related to alternative methods or any professional development? Because like at our school, our go-to, we try to have a really serious conversation about recess as well as sugar in school, which is a problem that nobody likes. But the bottom line is those things happen because those things work. To some teachers, believe it does work. So while most people are in favor of you have to have 30 minutes, is there any talk or discussion related to, well, what else are you going to do for other development opportunities for teachers to find other ways? Because when you take a minute per age away from a kid, it works. You know, so, but none of us like it. So what are we going to do to try to give other opportunities for teachers to learn other ways? Is that any discussions that relates to this? Because it's one of those bills where, yeah, it's just going to pass, and who's going to say more kids? But we have to have other opportunities for teachers to learn different ways to respond.
Right. It definitely was raised. It is not addressed at all in the bill. I mean, the bill would mandate it for K through 5. And so basically the implication is just that, yes, you're going to have to learn another way to discipline because it's counterproductive for you to discipline that way.
Sure.
Because it's going to lead to more behavior problems if kids aren't getting their sensory needs met.
Should not include at least a discussion in that.
Well, I believe that the local school board would have to set up the policy. So the idea would be, I would hope, that each local school board would address those sorts of things in the way they implemented it.
I mean, and I don't know, because I'm not an expert in this, but PBIS, positive behavioral intervention systems.
Supports, yeah.
And this is a behavioral system that, again, I'm not an expert. This is just like I've seen the bills go by. So, but that is something that a lot of districts have had success with in addressing behavioral problems. So the state has, for 2 years, increased funding through our regional education service agencies to get people out and to help districts implement that in hopes of having more productive discipline practices. I don't know how that rollout has gone, if that has really led to, you know, the kind of more positive disciplinary practices. I just know that is something that happens at the state level. In terms of professional development, that is supposed to align with teachers' kind of professional plans. So I think going back to what Elena said, I think that's
Well, I think that is the place to do it, and on down to the go-tos on the local level, but it would be nice if that was part of the verbiage in some way.
Or if we had funding to give grants to the schools, you can do this, that'd be a great thing. I think the schools want it, the school board wants it.
I just had a question about Senate Bill 211, the one that says that you can, it gives the option to get rid of milestones and allow schools to pick whatever other tests they want to use to measure their student success. I just didn't know if y'all have had a chance, what your thoughts are on that, or,
Is that the ESSA bill?
Yeah, this is Tippin's bill, this is
Yeah.
the testing,
Yeah.
yeah. This has been, I mean,
Yeah.
this has been the sleeper bill, because I think the implications of this are really significant, and there's been very little discussion about it. I mean, it passed out of the Senate, it's
Yeah, it
now
was
in the
very
House.
calm. I mean, it was like the LG was,
it's major though, because it has all the implications for CCRPI, and if once you start messing around with that and the student growth percentile and all, all the calculations have to be redone, and then you could theoretically have different bars for different schools, which it changes the way, so if you get your diploma from this high school, it may not mean the same thing as the diploma for this other high school. It has implications for ACT, SAT, I mean, everything.
It's huge,
crazy.
and I have been, I mean, I was actually having a conversation with some of the other advocates this afternoon after the Senate meeting, and kind of saying, I'm stunned that has not come up, because its implications are huge, and its implication for that, list of 153
Yeah.
failing schools is huge. Now, we're not at the point where we have replacements for milestones. I mean, so this is several years away from being rolled out. And this is really, as Senator Tippins, who's the author of the bill, is really trying to take advantage, as he puts it, to maximize the flexibility offered by the Every Student Succeeds Act. But it's big, and I'm frankly surprised that the governor hasn't stopped.
really,
Yeah, I mean, he fought so hard in 364 last year. I mean, this is potentially a significant change in the accountability system that we have, and really would shift how, we measure and, how we measure student achievement and student growth, and really does create a lot of uncertainty, or certainly the potential for a lot of variation across districts. So, but doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it.